So, guys, in this video, we'll see Amazon DynamoDB Global and local secondary indexes. So, in Amazon DynamoDB, indexes are used to improve query efficiency by providing alternate way to access data. Okay, wow. So, in DynamoDB offers two types of secondary indexes: global secondary indexes and local secondary indexes. Okay. So both types of index allows you to query data using a different attribute other than the primary key, but they differ in scope and how they work. Okay. See, basically, this global and local secondary indexes are mainly used to query a data, but they don't use primary key. Okay. Instead, they use a differ in scope and how they work. Okay. See, so we'll see Amazon DynamoDB global index first and will followed by local secondary index. Okay. So the first is global secondary index. So what it is? A global secondary index is an index that allow querying across the entire table using a different partition key and or sort key than the table's primary key. So it's an index, guys. Okay, so it's like an index. Okay, so basically, in the if you see the tables, right? Like in the tables, how we'll be having a primary key, partition key. If we consider a relational database, so like that, like here, a global index that allow querying across the entire table using a different partition keys and or sort key than the table primary key. Okay, so scope. So the global secondary index is a global, meaning it applies to all the items in the table, regardless of the partition they belong to. So this applies to all the items in the table, regardless of the partition they belong to. Okay, it's global. Okay, flexibility is like you can create a global secondary index with any attribute as a partition key and or sort key. They, these provide great flexibility to create alternate access patterns. Okay. Consistency. Queries against a GSI are eventually consistent, but by default. But you can request strongly consistent reads as well. Okay, in my previous video, I explained what is the strongly consistent means. Like here, you will enforce it. Okay, that's nothing but, for example, if the data is not the request data is not respond, if it is like responding in stale data, still you can enforce it by invoking this strongly consistent reads. Okay, and capacity. So GSI have their own provision throughput are used on demand mode and they are built separately from the base table. Okay, we'll see example. So if your table has user ID as a primary key, but you also want to query data using email address, you can create a GSI with email address as a partition key. Okay. If, for example, like you have a table, so that has user ID as primary key, but you also want to query data using email address. So you can create a GSI with email address as a partition key. Here you can use email address as a partition key. Next, we'll see local secondary index. So, local secondary index allow you to create an index so that uses the same partition key as the base table but with a different sort key. Okay. Scope. The LSI is a local to each partition of the base table. It allow you to query within a specific partition but with an alternate sort key. Okay. Here we have one limitation, guys. So you must define at the time the table is created and you cannot add them here. So while you create the table, that itself you have to mention it. Okay, I mean like you have to define it. The LSI here, the consistency is like it is strongly consistent or eventually consistent depending on your needs. Okay, here the whenever you query data, it's strongly consistent. Strongly consistent means like you will get up to date, data. Okay, capacity. So LSI share the same provision throughput as the base table and do not have specific separate capacity settings. Okay, we'll see one example. Suppose your table has order ID as a primary partition key and order date as a sort key. Okay, so order ID is partition key and order date as a sort key. You could create an LSI with order amount as a sort key, which allow you to query orders within the same partition based on the amount. Okay. So we'll see some key difference. Okay. For GSA and LSI. Partition keys can be different from the base table, same as the base table. Okay. For both. Sort key as well can be different from the base table, different from the base table sort key. Okay. Capacity. It is provision throughput. And in LSI, it says throughput with the base table. Okay, it depends on base table. Consistency, it's eventually consistent by default and supports strongly consistent rates. Okay. Creation can be added at any time, must be created when table is created for the LSI. And scope for GSI is global and local secondary is local. Okay, with a partition. And for the global, it's all across all partition. Okay. So within the partition, it's across all partition. So in summary, we'll see global secondary index provide flexibility by allowing you to use different partition and sort keys that the base table, which can be created or removed at any time. Local secondary index limits you to the same partition key, but allow using a different sort key. So requiring the LSI to be defined at table creation and sharing the table's capacity. Okay. So this is all about the Amazon DynamoDB Global and so local secondary index, guys. The next video will come. I'll explain about the Cassandra, Apache Cassandra. Okay. So thank you.